And I said last night, isn't this a blueprint for how the populist right and the populist left can find common ground and actually change society? We can unite against the center. We can unite against the center right and the center left, which have themselves seemed to struck a bargain of their own variety. The center right and the center left are collaborating to protect the system.
So I'm going to start today by showing you a clip I've shown several times of Steve Bannon, and it requires us to go back to, I believe, 2017.
I want to take you back to September 18th, 2008, Washington, D.C., the Oval Office. I think it's 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. President Bush, David's.
So there's people protesting him as a Nazi. Let me jump up here. We all know that everyone's a Nazi.
America, the central number is not how far he's behind, is that 70% of the American people believe for the first time in our history that the country was in decline and the elites were okay with that. That managed decline was the wave of the future. Whether it's in education, the southern border, China, Korea, Iran, our education, our health system. It was Donald Trump that turned that around. It's the party.
They laugh at him. And rightfully so. Donald Trump didn't turn shit around. But that's how he got elected, let's be honest. Because he spoke to those problems.
It's a very tough crowd. We'll have plenty of time to go through this. The party at Davos, the scientific, managerial, engineering, financial, cultural elite that run the world, have left a financial wasteland and decoupled from the middle class and the working class throughout the world. That is why Salvini and Orban and Brexit and now Bolsonaro, it shouldn't be lost on you the day Captain Bolsonaro is elected is the day Angela Merkel will leave the stage.
It's kind of like how the day Dick Cheney died was the day that Zoran Mamdani won election as mayor of New York. Very similar dynamic there, isn't it?
Trump's economic nationalism doesn't care about your race, your religion, your ethnicity, your color.
See, now I love to go back and see this in retrospect because listen to them laughing at him saying that because everyone has been trained by the propaganda engine to believe that Steve Bannon's a Nazi, Trump's a Nazi, and a fascist, and this and that. I was arguing with some dummy on Twitter earlier about this, and he's like, Trump's killed 600,000 people. And I was like, really? Where that would be a big headline. Like, where that can I see that? And he posted an article, a headline with no link to the article that said 600,000 people have died because of USAID, which is, we all know what that's complete propaganda because USAID is the funnel through which NGOs get their money. And so they're going to use that loudspeaker they have to say, oh my God, they're taking our money away. It's killing everyone.
Okay. I got a whole night to convert you. I saw the 28%. It does.
The good thing about this debate is Bannon overcomes the odds, despite them viewing him as a Nazi and there being actual protests at the beginning of the debate. He actually wins. And if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend you watch it because I've said this multiple times. This is the framework for the political discourse today. And this happened in 2017. And it's a debate between Steve Bannon, who's representing the populist side of the debate, versus David Frum, who's representing the liberals. David Frum, George Bush's speechwriter, is the liberal in this debate, and Steve Bannon is the quote-unquote conservative. And if you listen to the debate, you can see why I say this is the framework for the modern political discourse, because Bannon sounds like Bernie Sanders, and David Frum is clearly protecting the interests of the establishment and the status quo.
Doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter your sexual preference. It matters. I said economic nationalism. Work with me.
So again, these people are so propagandized, they don't even know what this guy actually stands for because they have been trained like little doggies, like good little doggies, to put on their tutu and do the turnaround with the hula hoop.
It cares if you're a citizen. Look at the results. Look at the results today. Lowest black unemployment in history, lowest Hispanic unemployment in 30 years. Wages rising across the board. Manufacturing jobs coming back. The populist nationalist message and its policies are working in the United States, and it's spreading. The revolt in Europe and now in Latin America. And I get contacted every day from Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East. We're at the beginning of a new political revolution, and that is populism. The only question before us, is it going to be a populist nationalism that believes in capitalism and deconstructing the administrative state and giving the little guy a piece of the action and break up this crony capitalism of big corporations and big government? Or is it going to be a Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders type of populist socialism? Because the party at Davos and the elites have blown too many calls. Too many existential events. The rise of China. The $7 trillion spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The deregulation that led to the financial crisis in 2008. How the financial crisis was bailed out. Where we are today in this over-leveraged society. Because as you know, most of you in this room that work in finance, we're heading to another financial crisis.
So this is Bannon back in 2017, and I wanted to start this conversation, this discussion with that clip because, again, that, in my view, is the framework for the modern political discourse, where you have the right-wing populists who have kind of overtaken the Republican Party, so we thought, until they got elected, and now they're dealing with the hangers-on, the neocon, hangers-on. But that's inevitable. The same thing. So the dynamic that's happening with the Republicans right now, the MAGA base versus the neocon hangers-on, the Ted Cruz, the Randy Fine, those people versus the Matt Gaetz and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Thomas Masseys, that dynamic was occurring within the Democratic Party too, between the Bernie Sanders populists and the Hillary Clinton old heads, old guard of the party. And the old guard of the Democrats just went, no, fuck you, we'll cheat to win, and look where that got them. The Republicans, on the other hand, had a much more open primary, and there's even reports that the Democrats had, people go vote for Trump in the Republican primary because Hillary wanted to run against him. So this whole thing, their whole strategy of, hey, we'll let the old guard run the party, just blew up in their face. So I start with this clip of Steve Bannon, as the genesis of this, because I've spent this last week kind of, my media diet is vast and varied, but I've been watching a lot of right-wing shows, specifically Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, because those are the popular, and Candace Owens. Those are the top dogs in conservative talk right now. And Tucker Carlson did a piece recently where he sounds like Elizabeth Warren. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm going to show you the fucking clip. You've probably seen this if you're like me and you consume a lot of political media, but this is just the clip pulled from TikTok. So watch this. This is Tucker Carlson like the other day.
Have been trained to blame the borrower, not the lender. You took the loan, you got to pay it back. Okay, fine. But is it really that simple? Because the relationship between borrower and lender is inherently symbiotic. What other relationship is like that? Well, addict and pusher. You can't be a drug addict unless someone sells you drugs. And yet we punish the drug dealer more harshly than we punish the drug addict because we understand that the drug dealer is making all this suffering possible. But we don't feel that way about credit card companies or the.
So before he continues, I would say we need to look at immigration through the same lens. not punishing the immigrant, but the enablers of illegal immigration who take advantage of a broken system.
Guys who are literally offering buy now, pay later for DoorDash. Some unemployed or underemployed college grad went to some crappy college, got a worthless degree because he believed in it. Now he can't get a job at JP Morgan. And we are telling him it's totally cool to buy sushi on credit. He shouldn't buy sushi on credit. Obviously, that's dumb. But he's a kid. Who's worse? The guy who borrows the money or the guy who loans the money at some ridiculous rate?
So that is Tucker Carlson literally
addict and pusher
sounding like Elizabeth Warren. And that is the populist wing of the Republican Party ascending. And so to continue down this path, over on Rumble this week, you have Nick Fuentes, who is talking about taking real action. And when you see this, you're going to understand, again, just like Steve Bannon, just like any of these guys, why Nick Fuentes is being smeared as a Nazi. Because he's advocating for actual political action, not just talking about it. And I think this was really stunning to me. To see this. So he was discussing negotiations between left and right-wing populists and what that would look like. And the more I listen to this guy, the more I understand why he is quote unquote ascendant, as Daisha Nekrasova said on Glenn Greenwald recently, because she was canceled for having a conversation with the guy. She lost like her acting contract for talking to this dude. But when you listen to Nick talk, he has a broadcaster voice. He's a good looking dude. Like I'm not trying to get down with him, but as a man to another man, he's a handsome dude. He has a broadcaster face and a broadcaster voice. And in addition to those qualities, he's razor fucking sharp. He's a smart dude. He knows what he's talking about, and he's funny. So here he is talking about uniting left and right wing populists and things that each side should be willing to give up in a negotiation of this nature. And this is actually really good stuff. So
tonight, there's not a ton of news, so I really want to talk about some of the ideas which have been brought to the center lately. And I've been doing this. I've been talking a lot about strategy. I've been talking a lot about the ideas, trying to clarify for people that don't understand what we're really about and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to achieve it. And this is a perfect example of this. So last night on my show, I forget the context exactly. I think we were talking about how Democrats and Republicans came together to compel the release of the Epstein files. You had a Democrat, Ro Khanna, and a Republican, Thomas Massie. And they worked together on this discharge petition, which forced a vote on their bill, which would order the DOJ to release the Epstein files. And I said, isn't that a remarkable blueprint? Isn't that an example of bipartisan cooperation? Republicans and Democrats are at each other's throats. There's gridlock in Washington, longest government shutdown. I said, but this is an example of maybe where the populist left and the populist right can find common ground on something that we all agree is important, which is, in this case, accountability for the oligarchs. That's really what Epstein is about. Epstein is about the pernicious influence of foreign states using their intelligence apparatus to manipulate our oligarchs, our powerful private and public people that have influence over our society. That's what the story is. And Jeffrey Epstein, who was some sort of intelligence mercenary, a go-between with the CIA, MI6, Israeli intelligence, he was gathering blackmail on Western oligarchs, British, American, and other oligarchs, potentially selling that information, working on behalf of intel agencies. To what end? Well, that's why we need to see the files. We're not actually sure the breadth of that network and the substance of what he was gathering on these people and to what end. And so there's a bipartisan consensus on this issue. This bill was passed 427-1 in the House yesterday, adopted 99-1 in the Senate, is going towards the president's desk for a signature. And I said last night, isn't this a blueprint for how the populist right and the populist left can find common ground and actually change society? We can unite against the center. We can unite against the center right and the center left, which have themselves seemed to struck a bargain of their own variety. The center right and the center left are collaborating to protect the system.
That is so fucking astute. What he said right there. The center right and the center left are collaborating to protect the system, the status quo, I would argue, not the system. The system would cleanse this kind of cancer out of it. The system was built to cleanse this kind of cancer out of it, but it has been, legally rigged and jerry-rigged over the years to allow these people to do this. Normally, people like Pelosi and McConnell should have been out of Congress years ago. But this is such a fantastic point he makes right here. I want to just back that up just a little bit.
Center right and center left are in favor of the warfare state. Center right and center left, populist right and the populist left can find common ground and actually change society. We can unite against the center. We can unite against the center right and the center left, which have themselves seemed to struck a bargain of their own variety. The center right and the
We're going to get into this in a minute with the Dick Cheney funeral.
center left are collaborating to protect the system. Center right and center left are in favor of the warfare state. Center right and center left protect the oligarchs, money in politics, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, the billionaires. And so I said last night, wouldn't it be a creative way to change how the table is set if instead of the right and the left fighting each other, and we're both disappointed by what we get from Republicans and Democrats, what if the far left and far right united as ordinary people on the basis of overthrowing the oligarchs? And I said, in order for this to be possible, there would need to be a compromise. And
now you understand why this man is so demonized. Now you understand. It's not because he makes racist jokes or because he's an actual Nazi who's goose stepping through the streets, trying to cleanse the country of, people who aren't white. It's because of stuff like this. But let him finish.
the compromise is this. The left is going to have to give up their anti-white polemical rhetoric and policies, the grievance politics. They're going to have to give up mass migration. I said, and the right is going to have to give up this illusory free market, the supply side economics, the free.
I like that he said illusory free market too, because it is illusory. It's not a free market. It's controlled
Trade,
by capital.
All of that. And so what does the compromise look like? And you tell me how this sounds. We have some sort of national effort to have universal education, universal health care. I don't love it. I don't think that's going to work, but I can live with it. And in exchange.
Now, this is where he gets it wrong. And I only say that, I don't want to sidebar too much, but I only say that because, Nick, there are visible examples of this working in other countries. In Europe, they have nationalized healthcare. All it does is cut out middlemen, which is the bane of this fucking country. Middlemen in the mix on everything. The reason healthcare costs in America are skyrocketed high is because there's a bunch of dickheads in the middle of it taking their cut that are unnecessary, especially in the age of the internet when you can see a doctor on fucking FaceTime.
We close the borders and we prevent all this mass migration from coming into the United States. On the left, they get what they want. They get their affordability. They get their public transit, education, social safety net, these sorts of public services. But they're not going to be able to have all the mass migration. Maybe they can live with that too. So I say this last night. And the clip goes out on Twitter, and predictably, everybody has something to say, and people are calling this National Socialism, which is Nazism. It's Nazi politics. They said, wait a second, you want cheap healthcare and closed borders? You're a Nazi. That's actually National Socialism, because you're a nationalist and you're a socialist. It's in the name. That's what a Nazi is.
You're an anti-Semite.
So Dinesh D'Souza, who was born in India, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is an anchor baby and a big pharma scam artist, and many leftists too. They said, this is Nazi politics.
This is Nazi politics.
So let me get this straight. Zohran Mamdani wins the mayoral election in New York, campaigning on affordability. He says, we want affordable public transit, affordable housing, affordable groceries, affordable health care, public services. Donald Trump wins the election saying, we want borders. 10 million illegal aliens in 4 years is way too many. We need to stop irregular migration. We need to deport many of the people that are here. We need to do this so we can put American labor first, so that Americans can have access to hospitals and schools, so that the cost of living is not being driven up by this glut of foreigners moving here, so that we still have some recognizable society. And so
quick sidebar here, because I live this every day. I live in an area where there are a lot of H-1B visas that work at the hospital and the university. And I drive rideshare. And a couple weeks ago, I talked on this stream about the H-1B visa thing and showed a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which, again, it's interesting that she's resigning now. But literally after I did that broadcast, I went out and did some rideshare driving. And the first person I picked up was a Nigerian immigrant from a hospital in Scrubs. And this guy was the fucking cream of the crop, the nicest dude. We had the best conversation. You know, he was a really great dude, and he was very proud of himself that he had pulled himself up and he got it to America. He was like, you know, his siblings, his younger siblings looked up to him and all that stuff. And, you know, I think it's beautiful. And I don't think that it shouldn't be allowed at all. By the same token, after I dropped him off, I thought, you know, as cool as that guy was, I would prefer that Americans were prioritized for those jobs. And, you know, the argument is that there aren't enough qualified people to take those jobs. Yes, there is. That's a ridiculous premise. And this is the same dynamic that's happening in blue collar work, you know, with farm workers and you know, janitors and all that kind of stuff. And again, this isn't an argument against immigration completely or against, you know, but what other country doesn't enforce their borders? Like, I can't go to, my brother was trying to move to Mexico City. He doesn't have a visa. He had to come back to the US every 90 days to stay in Mexico. Mexico enforces their fucking immigration laws. And that's all people are really asking for. So I think that the path Nick's on here is a very good one, but let him finish. I just wanted to tell that story as a sidebar to say that I've seen this reality myself firsthand.
Here I am saying, I have an idea. Why don't we take what people on the left care about, what people on the right care about? Let's just do both. Is that insane? And by the way, people on the right are also dependent on Obamacare subsidies and to some extent food stamps and government services.
Yeah, because everyone is, Nick. The economy is in shambles.
Government contracts. And at the same time, much of what the left cares about is actually hurt by mass migration. How do you have public transit if you got people being lit on fire and stabbed in the throat? How do you have universal health care if you have open borders? Too expensive. Can't do it. So here I come last night saying, okay, why don't we just have cheap health care? Why don't we just have investment in public resources, public services? And let's also close the borders. You know, because if you don't have an infinite amount of people from the third world moving here, maybe it's more doable. Maybe it's more economical than it would otherwise be to have a social safety net. We already have one.
Yep.
Half the country already doesn't pay taxes. Half the country already is getting some form of government transfer in the form of Medicaid, Medicare, supplemental income, food stamps, subsidized housing, like you name it.
And we can afford foreign wars, but somehow we can't afford that. We can afford to funnel billions of dollars to the Middle East and Ukraine and to scare Venezuela, which I'm not going to go too deep on today, but I really hope that doesn't happen. It looks more like saber rattling to me and just a byproduct of our bloated military, but I'm getting off track. I think Nick is 1,000% correct here. And again, I can see why he's so demonized in the mainstream press when I listen to him bring to the table, real, quantifiable strategies on how to, overthrow the status quo with using, voters, getting voters together, united on the same issues, because that's a real threat, And I also respect that this new generation, they're not fucking having it. They're as much shit as Gen Z gets and these kids get, they're smart and they're way more motivated than my generation was. My generation elected Barack Obama and then sat back in our fucking rocking chairs and went, "Oh, we did it, guys. We did it. Yeah. Black president." As he sat and did everything that Dick Cheney and George Bush did. We swallowed the identity horse shit. And just took a break from, and then held up signs of like, if Hillary had won, I'd still be at brunch. So Nick is out here in the streets and he's not afraid to say things that people would normally consider unsayable third rails. And this new generation does not give a shit about your failed system. They're not going to go with the flow like my generation did with Obama. Trump was the answer to the Democrats, a gigantic fuck you for trying to foist Hillary Clinton on us as the new version of identity politics. And Obama was Dick Cheney and George Bush in blackface. Hillary was the neocons with a vagina. And I was so angry at my liberal friends who went along with these narratives that Bernie's a misogynist. Remember when Bernie was ascendant in the primaries and all these obvious, media smears started hitting, like Elizabeth Warren, and he's a misogynist. He said a woman can't be president. Or socialism is so bad, like Bernie's going to ruin America. That primary was the actual end of the Democratic Party. And I say that not even just as an opinion, but as a fact. Because after they shot themselves in the face by cheating Bernie and alienating young leftists like myself, young at the time, I'm somewhat young at the time anyway, they lost to Donald Trump. And then instead of self-reflection and kind of like realignment and going like, maybe we shouldn't have done that to Bernie. Maybe we would have actually gotten somewhere if we hadn't just absorbed all the neocons from the Republican Party who were against Trump and we actually listened to the base that was trying to elect Bernie Sanders. No, they didn't do that. They doubled down on identity politics, and then COVID hit, so they were kind of able to crow Joe Biden in there. And I won't go into all the ways in which that was shady. But we can just assume that you understand the pandemic era was the era of propaganda so strong, these people thought they were the smart ones.
But ain't that America?